created to have some fun together, sharing and singing. So, join and enjoy.
Our love for opera brings us together. Thanks for being with us in this trip.
Hello again, and thank you very much for joining us on another program. We are having this, say, a special number of episodes that we are actually recording with public. You can find the information on the venue and a couple of pictures in our page in Ko-fi. And we have Katia with us, of course. Hi, Katia. How are you?
Hi.
Thanks for joining. And we are having today one of the many, because Maestro Rossini wrote a good number of pages that are very well known in the world of opera and the world of music. And as we were just sharing just before we started the recording of the program, also in the world of cartoons, there are several pieces. You know, the opening from Guglielmo Tell that was known as the Llanero Solitario, which I don't know what is the name in English of that, by the way. And we have the Figaro, and we have now Rosina. We have Rosina with una voce poco fa. So as you know, the dynamics in this program is that we are going to start sharing with you about the composer, then talk about the opera, then talk about the character, then we talk about when it happens, and we start talking about the details of the aria. So, Maestro Rossini, I wanted to share something with you. This year, today is May the 30th. We are recording it today on May the 30th, 2024. And this was composed over 200 years ago. Just imagine that. Maestro Rossini did such a great job that his works are still well known even 200 years after. So 200 years after, we are still talking about this very famous Barbiere di Siviglia. Also, Maestro Rossini is known for having these very, very, very fast-paced melodies, these tremendously hilarious melodies that always enchant us, that make us, in my case, that makes me move my feet. To many others, move their body or their hands or their head or whatever, because he knew how to really build on a rhythmic base and bring joyful melodies along with it. And also as a result of that, he wrote his most well-known opera, of course, it's Il Barbiere di Siviglia. Il Barbiere, very well known by everybody, closely followed by La Cenerentola, and then a good number of other operas that are less known. Not that they are less beautiful, but that they are less known. And there are not so many numbers that are as well known as it is in Il Barbiere. In Il Barbiere, all the main characters have well-known melodies, meaning that in this season we will go back to that several times. So, with that being said, well, I'm not sure if you would like to add something to the understanding of Maestro Rossini, Katia, something that you would like to add?
Well, I'm not sure if you were about to mention this, but a peculiarity that we can find in Rossini's operas is that he wrote his main female characters not for a soprano as usual. And that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, now that you mention it, thank you for sharing, because I was about to forget it. It is said that Rossini had this weakness for women, and that he was, if not in love, at least one of his flirtings was not even a mezzo, was a contralto. And so he thought that a good idea to conquer this girl, this singer, was to compose for her this number of operas that would match her voice. That's what it is said, and that's what it is known or taken as a fact. It is very interesting because I just mentioned that it was 200 years ago, and 200 years ago was the decline or almost the ending part of the castrati. And the castrati were males who were actually, as the name itself says, were actually castrated so that their voice wouldn't be developed into a manly voice, that they could keep those high tones of an adolescent with the power of the virility of a man. That those were, and they were very. They were able, the technique that they developed was very good for singing ornaments and things that sopranos would later do. So we are witnessing the end of an era, the end of the castrati, and the beginning of a new era where the sopranos would later take over all those pyrotechnics. But in between, there is Maestro Rossini who says, hey, I am going to write it with ornaments, but it's going to be for the contraltos or low to medium voices, not the high voices. I also read, and I'm not sure if that is true, I also read that, in fact, Maestro Rossini didn't like the soprano voice. I'm not sure how true can that be.
Like soprano voice.
It might be true, it might be not, but what it is true is that one way or the other, sopranos have made their way into the arias by Maestro Rossini, which we are going to talk about. So, having explained that, virtuosity is the word that I was using, looking for. The castrati were virtuous singers, and so it was expected that the singers to come would be able to do that. Of course, there are some obstacles in terms of technique. We have the tenors hadn't learned or developed what is now known as the head voice. They were topped below the high C. So there is a good number of circumstances that were happening back later. So the male voices were not that virtuous. The sopranos were not given that role yet. The castrati were in decline. The contraltos were taking over. So if you see, the world of opera was very different to what we know now. And now, jumping now into the Il Barbiere di Siviglia, he is not the creator of this story. He's also taking this story, I would say, borrowed. He borrowed the same story of Il Barbiere di Siviglia, because if you have read, then you know that Maestro Mozart also wrote on the vase of the same character, and that's where Le Nozze di Figaro come from. But if you watch Le Nozze di Figaro and Il Barbiere di Siviglia, they don't seem to be part or based on the same story. They seem to be two very different worlds, two very different tesituras, two very different styles of writing, but at the end, they both are based on the same plot, on the same story. So Maestro Rossini decides to take this story and writes Il Barbiere di Siviglia. And in Il Barbiere di Siviglia, which is a very complicated story to tell, because everything happens there. But before, we are not providing any details on the plot, on the libretto, because that is way too much. But why don't we, Katia, talk a little about Rosina? Who is Rosina in this opera? What is she up to? What are your thoughts? How do you prepare for working on the Rosina role?
Well, I shouldn't have to be prepared to sing this role, honestly, because it's not for a soprano as we've been talking. But I think that something very interesting here in Rossini's works is that his music is very playful. It's plenty of notes and trills and ornaments. So you have to take the characters. The operas got a new genre named opera buffa. It's all about laughing and joking, because we have the idea of serious operas, many serious operas before Rossini, and at this point it's all about fun. So when you are working a Rossini character as Rosina, you have to sing, yes, but it's a lot about having fun as much as arias allow you.
And I think that we have to mention now that you brought it up. Yeah, the opera buffas are for having fun, for relaxing. Even if they want to share a drama, or such as in La Cenerentola, the truth is that it is composed in a way that you can have fun. But let's go back to the point that we have discussed in previous seasons when we talk about how difficult it is to make people laugh, because you have to sing correctly and you also have to make people laugh. And that is very difficult to do, because in one hand, most opera singers, if not boring, at least are very serious. And when you are serious, because you know in your classes you have to be serious, your singing teacher is very serious, the pianist is very serious, the orchestra director is usually very serious. So in a world where everybody's serious, you are expected to have fun, and you are expected to be contagious to people watching the opera on how much fun you're having. And sometimes, and many times, you have to come up with movements, or on the scene, the stage director would tell you, and then you, Rosina, have to run to the left, and then do that, and come back to the center, and then look back, and then look up, and then do this, and then do that. And that also makes you lose the correct positioning of your emission, which some, if not blocks, at least doesn't play in favor of a good emission of what you're actually singing. So when you're pursuing that it is believable on stage, you may also be affecting the singing technique. And besides all of that, you have to appear to be having fun. So when you put all that together, then you can say, man, that is difficult.
It's not fun at all.
It's not. So how do you prepare? Because you shared in another episode that we recorded, you shared with us that for Musetta, you prepare yourself to be a rock star. And Musetta certainly is. What are your thoughts when you're preparing for the very well-known Rosina, which in a way could be a rock star, because she's going to try to manipulate and put everything on her favor so that things happen the way she wants. What are your thoughts when you're preparing for Rosina?
Oof. It's a very complex work, and I have to think that I don't sing the entire character, just the aria, because you have to make an effort studying every single note at perfection, then to build the phrases and try to feel your sound is supported, is strong, is firm. And when you have this security, this confidence, then you can start to play with the intention, and you can start to perform it in a funny way. But above all, you have to feel you are in a very good condition, in a very well physical condition as an athlete is, because you have to move, you have to sing. It doesn't have to make your voice shakes, and every pitch here has to be perfect. So it's very complicated.
And it certainly is complicated, and sometimes, or most of the times, to be fair, people are expecting the singer to be believable in the sense that you're having fun. I mean, why don't we start talking about the aria itself, so that people can understand? And let's say hi to the children at the door. Hi, children. Thanks for being there. You have to transmit it. Let's take the first phrase. First, we need to clarify something. We will try to refer to the score as it is written for the mezzo, or a lower voice, because contraltos can also do Rosina. But Katia will certainly come up with something different, because the sopranos like to extrapolate as high as they can, add as many notes as they can, change the text as they can, add cadenzas where there are not, add ornaments. If there were 2 ornaments, they would add 8. Why not? So we will try to adhere to the score written, but as Katia will be sharing with us the example of how it is actually sung, you will notice that there are thousands of differences. But I think the only thing that we are going to be on the same page is in the opening. And I wanted to mention it because you say, yes, you have to be funny, yes, you have to blah, 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 blah. But how do you actually do it? Because it opens saying, una voce poco fa. But how do you say it just like, una voce? Even if you say it boring, people will say, una voce. Oh, that's so boring. How do you add that color, that spice to the phrase? Maybe una voce poco fa. You see, you play with the volume and with some of the syllables to make it more interesting. Because truth is that Maestro Rossini didn't add any indication on the volume, whether it should be a crescendo or it should be marking something or anything there. There is no. So the singer has to be creative on how do you portray the opening phrase, because if you are not able to catch the public in the first phrases, then it's going to be harder for you to catch them at the middle of the aria. No? So you better prepare for giving a good opening. Una voce poco fa, qui nel cor mi risuono. But the thing is that for voices like contraltos, mezzos, and of course mine, it is very difficult to try to do something more ornamental because our voice is not naturally ornamental. So, but how, on your perspective of a soprano, how do you like to play with that opening phrase?
I think that personally, I'm thinking about what it is about to come. What is Rosina about to say? All the plans she's making in her head. So that helps me to make not a boring phrase, not a boring phrase for the beginning. She's already spicy in this point. So, una voce poco fa, qui nel cor mi risuonò. So you are preparing the thriller, the emotion, the expectation.
And that thing that you did with the last mi risuono is very interesting because singers usually forget that. Singers usually keep their focus on una voce poco fa, qui nel cor mi risuono, and then the next time. But mi risuono. Even if, I'm not sure if you agree, maybe keep the suono, keep the last no a little longer, or add something to that no so that people know, this girl is up to something.
Then, yeah, it's a little bit thinking about telling a boy a story, and then the villain said and the witch appears. You have to create this atmosphere in the very first phrase.
And by the way, now that you're telling us about it should be taken like a storytelling, this aria has a very long introduction. Is una voce poco fa qui nel cor mi risuonò, il mio cor ferito già e l'indoro fu che il piagò, sì l'indoro mio sarà, lo giurai la vincerò, sì l'indoro mio sarà, lo giurai la vincerà, il tutto ricurserà e l'ingegno guzzerà, la vinza che terrà e contenta resterà, sì again, sì l'indoro mio sarà, which by the way is 3 times very similar, and I know that's why sopranos like to play each of the times in a different way, because really it sounds a little repetitive. Then lo giurai la vincerò, sì l'indoro, again l'indoro mio sarà, lo giurai la vincerò. If you notice, it is very, very long let's say the introductory part, because the actual aria starts later. We started there, but the actual singing, in quotes, is Io sono docile. But before, you had to prepare, and that was my next question, how with this super long introduction, because this is super long before you start with the una voce poco fa, you really have to be in focus, because Il Barbiere is Il Figaro is very simple. And you immediately jump into what you are going to tell. La Calumnia, it's also very, very simple, because you immediately fall, even if it starts La Calumnia, tan, 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 but it immediately falls into the melody that's going to be developed. But Rosina is giving around 2 minutes for repeating that lindoro mio sarà, si, lindoro mio sarà, si, lindoro mio sarà, la giurai, la vincerò, si, lindoro mio sarà. You see, it tends to be repetitive and super long. What is your advice for that section?
My teacher's advice, and now my advice as a teacher, is to try to say, when we have the same phrase once and again, try to say something different in each one. For example, we are saying here, si mio sarà. Well, the first time you can be saying this to yourself. The second time, it's probably thinking about you, Rosina, saying this to Lindoro. Probably this is the third one is for the public. So you will have different intentions in every single time you say the same phrase once and again.
And we know that the mezzos, or the contraltos singing this role, really don't go very high and usually follow what is written. But we know that sopranos, and that's what it is about, sopranos wouldn't just go for si lindoro mio sarà. What is it that you like to do in those repetitions in terms of ornaments?
Well, I tried to make the first si lindoro as is written, but from that point to the rest, I do whatever I want. For example, I have si lindoro mio sarà, and then I have si lindoro mio sarà. So there's no way that it's boring to be listening the same si lindoro mio sarà, because there are many variations. So indeed, the public is expecting all these ornaments, all these pyrotechnics.
And the truth is that we have to say it. This is a long aria. Along with these introductory and repetitions, it really is long. Maestro Rossini had also this predilection for making life of singers difficult, because sometimes he added too many ornaments, or he made it too long, or he was able to find a way to make their lives difficult. But now let's jump to the actual part of the una voce poco fa, which is the name under which we know this participation by Rosina. And io sono docile, when you say io sono docile, it also starts, there is a very particular way of constructing by Rossini, and we're going to compare, if not side by side, because the aria for Angelina in La Cenerentola is somehow similar to this aria for Rosina in Il Barbiere, in the way that they have a super long introductory part, because they both have a long introductory part. Then you have some bars where you add the music preparing for the actual aria, and then they start with their aria. And when they start with their aria, they start with middle to low notes, and as they progress in the aria, he starts bringing the voice a little higher, so that the conclusion and the high note at the end sounds, if not natural, sounds like a conclusion of something that has been growing. But the singer has to approach to the aria with that thought that you are singing Io sono docile, but how again you prepare, because now at least in this score says it, Rossini starts with piano, so io sono docile, son rispettosa, sono obbediente, you know, but for a soprano, I know, and more for your a tessitura like yours, this is like super slow. Like sustaining the notes for way too long, because even if you say io sono do, it's like ultra slow for you, right?
Yes.
Because you would like io sono docile, son rispetto, something like that, right?
Well, I think that you have to find the point where you feel comfortable here. Let's remember that one of my main suggestions is to focus on your air. So you have here lots of ornaments, lots of notes, and one of the best ways to approach to a song like this is to think about your air flowing the entire time. Or you are in the risk of sounding like a chicken. I honestly respect but don't like at all when a voice sounds like io sono. No, I'm an enemy of that way of doing things. If you focus on your air, I think you can have a cleaner sound. Io sono docile, sono rispettosa, sono obbediente, dolce amorosa. I think it's cleaner, it's pure.
But truth is that people are more used to listening to that effect of I really don't know how to call that effect because you explained it very well. But if you listen to maybe 100% of the recordings, at least 90% of those do exactly that, because it is easier. And when you do that, the singer can get away with it without singing the actual notes, because the effect is sort of I'm not sure if I would like to call it a boomerang, or I don't know how to call it, because this effect makes the listener being somehow unable to catch what is the actual note that the singer is singing. But when you do it the other way around, then it is clear what note he's actually singing. So if I wanted to people never notice that I never learned the notes, I would go with the first. To be sincere, because the other way is way to expose, right? And I am not going to give names. Please don't make me do that. I am not giving names of very famous recent Rossinian singers, which is worse, because they claim to be specialists in the repertoire of Rossini, and they do exactly that. I know that you have already a couple of names in mind, both for male and female voices, that they do that, and they have built a career at very important international houses doing that. And for it is my understanding that that way of proceeding, because let's think that you are a lyrical tenor, and for some reason you decided to bring 4 Rossini arias to one of your recitals. Maybe that day you got away with it. But if you're building a career and you are constantly singing Rossini based on that, that's not even fair. You're hurting your voice for doing that. So my advice would be, if you're a lazy singer and you don't want to make sure that you're singing the notes, Don't build a career on Rossini or on ornaments because Donizetti in a way is similar, right? But let's keep moving on because we already have a half an hour of the recording, and the children, I noticed that they are getting tired, but they don't want to sit on the chairs. They are like shy. They don't want to enter the room. But let's keep moving because if you, as I was mentioning, the first part is sort of slow, at least for a high voice. And depending on the way the soprano, the mezzo is doing it, you may also find that it could be or either boring or unattractive. That's the problem with many mezzos or contraltos trying to go with this role, that they put too much emphasis on the pasta of their voice that they forget about the rest of it. And Rosina is not Lucia di Lammermoor. I mean, it's not Lardon Vincenzi, where you have to flow and have the legatos. No. Rosina is a very attractive role to sing. She has to be believable at all times. So if you take the role, I don't want to say to take it too seriously because all singers have to be serious about what they perform. But what I mean is when you sing it too seriously, like, oh, I have an E and then I have this, and you emphasize it as if you were Lucia or as if you were Mimi, then you're losing the complete sense of Rosina. She's losing the brightness and the quality that make her attractive. What would be your word of advice on that, on the whole approach to this part of Rosina? Sorry,
no,
I was thinking of a Spanish soprano that I am not going to give her name, and she's a lyrical soprano also, and she likes to sing Rosina, but it's like listening Mimi doing ornaments, and it doesn't work that way, not really. But now I keep myself silent. What is your next advice for Rosina?
Well, we have to set in our minds what are we saying. Yes, sometimes we are concentrated in the technique, and it's obviously the most important point when you are about to sing anything. But if you are approaching to something like Rosina, you are not an early student. You have an already settled voice. So you have to think that you are about to make a plan. You are developing a strategy. So keep this in mind. Give You already have a developed voice, so you can focus now on the intention. What are you saying? Not just the words. Try to read between the lines.
And of course, as we mentioned earlier, it is easy to say, but it is more difficult to actually do it. Because as we are approaching the end of the aria, it is, we can say, also repetitive. Rossini, by the way, we hadn't mentioned it, liked to repeat his phrases over and over and over again, which again brings us to the fact that if you don't make any variation in those repetitions, you may end up being boring. Because I was looking, e cento trappole prima di cedere, e cento tra ra 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 ra, ta 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 ta. You see, I am a little exaggerating it, but that's what it builds in the mind of the listener. Just, e cento tra, you know, like almost yawning. E cento trappole instead of e cento trappole prima di cedere farò giocar farò, or well, that would be my suggestion, but of course each interpreter can say, okay,
Yes.
here I add volume, then I take away the volume.
Yes.
Go ahead.
At least for sopranos ornaments, there are some parts when it could sound like a laugh. You could laugh here. Me fall with a try to play with this idea.
And that is very easy because you're a soprano and you're singing above your the central C. Because but try to do it with a contralto voice. That's the way it's going to sound, right?
If you're not a soprano, don't try this.
Yeah, and you have to be a light soprano as well, because if you're, as I was saying earlier, if you're a lyrical soprano, like the ones who sing me, but they say, I have my technique and I can get away with the ornaments, nobody is going to believe you when you try to do that laughing. Because the way you have to place your voice for it to sound like a laughter, it's different. And lyrical sopranos plays everything, like I would say, 100% of their pasta all the time. So trying to position for sounding like a laughter, it's difficult. So I would maybe then say, if you're going to go for a suggestion like that, just record yourself, see if what you are doing actually works. Because if you notice that it doesn't work for you, most likely will not work for the public. So if it doesn't sound like a convincing laughter, if it doesn't sound like you're having fun, maybe, and sorry to insist, you should look for another role. Rossini has more serious roles, a little heavier, but even if you want to add Rossini to your repertoire, I would insist, just do it if you feel that your voice can actually be playful with it, because otherwise you will sound like Ulrika trying to make a laughter. Ulrika. It never sounds well. Which is funny because actually Maestro Rossini wrote it for that type of voice, for a contralto. So with ornaments, but at least a contralto. So it is difficult to do that. And now let's talk about the final note, because everybody loves to talk about the high notes at the end. Because as we were saying that it has several repetitions, farò giocare 100 trapole prima di cedere e 100 trapole farò giocare e 100 repeating e 100 trapole farò giocare e 100 trapole farò giocare farò giocare, and then you ascend to the high note. But many people do not do it at the farò. They don't do it at the farò. They don't do it. They usually do it at the jo and then bring it lower for car, so that you can wrap it up. Because if you do it as it is written, truth is that it sounds weird. Farò giocare. It's like.
What just happened here?
Yeah, what just happened? He committed a mistake, or Maestro Rossini got it wrong, or what? What would you like to go about it for?
Are you going to start again?
He ran out of breath, or what's going on there? How would you like to wrap this aria on your song?
Well, it has to do with many things. It's a very long aria, it's complicated, and probably at this point you're exhausted. Well, the first recommendation is that if you're exhausted, probably this aria is not for you. So please don't damage yourself and try something else, honestly. You can be tired, but in an acceptable measure. Well, you can end up with a not that high note. But if you are feeling very, very comfortable, even when you already sang high notes and scales and agility and every kind of ornament, go for the highest you can. And end up with glory.
And the question we have made in the past: do you suggest highest or longest? Because you can say ja, and then car, because since you added everything, ja, car, or ja, God, and then because the the orchestra will continue for a few bars after you finish, and so you may appear short of breath. So you have to be very spectacular if you go very high, so that people applaud, give you the applause before the orchestra finishes. But sometimes you are so tired that you say, "Oh no, I will not try a high note."
I think that if you have a good technique and a good breathing, you can take a deep breath, a very intelligent rest. And nobody will hear the orchestra.
Yeah, that's quite possible that it is going to happen, because again, going back to that Spanish singer whose name I don't want to give, she also has that problem. She doesn't have that super high note, so I think she sings an A. Yeah, I think she stays with the A, but her A is not very spectacular either. So it falls somewhere between, because it's not as spectacular as a coloratura soprano, and it is not as powerful as a mezzo. So she's stuck somewhere in between, and I am left with the feeling that this was not the Rossini I was expecting. What happened here? But I think we need to wrap up today's program. It is just time for us to leave. But Katia, why don't we wrap up today's program with you singing us a part of this Il Barbiere di Siviglia, saying again hi to the little children who never dared to enter the room, and thanking them for listening for over half an hour. Why don't you share with us a part of this Una voce poco fa, and with this we finish today's program.
Sure.
You can follow our channel for the latest updates and more content. Opera We Love Singing, in just one word. Link in the description of the episode.